Hi everyone, I'm Laura from Omtara. Thanks for joining me here today. Teaching beading to others is one of my greatest passions, so I hope you enjoy the tutorial and happy beading. Hello, today I'm going to teach a lesson on double wrapped loops. So on my bead mat I have my round nose, I have my cutter, and I have my chain nose plier. I've got a spool of craft wire, and I've got two pearls waiting for me right there. So generally when I measure my wire, decide how much to cut, I have to take into account the size of my beads, and I allow 1.5 inches for the top wrapped loop, and I allow 1.5 inches of wire for the second wrapped loop, and then I have to allow the space of the beads are going to take up. So for these particular beads I'll probably cut a 3.5 inch piece of wire to be able to wrap that. And if I'm going to be wrapping a crazy wrap, I would allow a little bit more wire. So I've got some pieces of wire cut. They're about a little bit over 4 inches, and I'll start with those. So I've got my wire, and the first step is that you take your chain nose plier, and I'm going to grab the wire about 1.5 inches down from the tip. And then I'm going to use my working hand to bend the wire over the top of the tool. I always tell my students that the tool hand holds, the opposite hand does the work. So my finger is going to bend the wire over the top of the tool, just like that. My chain nose has done its job, so it's going to sit down, and I'm going to pick up my round nose pliers, and I'm going to place that round nose right into the corner, just like that. And again, with my working hand, I'm going to pull the wire up over the top of the tool and down. Now I have to reposition my tool, and I make sure my wire is nice and snug in that loop, and then I bring the wire under the tool. And it doesn't matter if I go in front of the wire or behind, I just want to make sure that my wire ends up back sticking out perpendicular. And then there's my loop, ready to go. So at this point I'd like to ask myself, where am I going to put this? So if I were going to attach this loop right here to a chain, I would have to attach it while it's open. But since I'm making my first component, I'm going to wrap it closed. So again, I'm going to use my chain nose pliers, they pick them up, and I'm going to grasp the loop in the plier and then use my working hand to wrap. Now, what happens here sometimes, especially for people who are beginning, is that they just wrap until all that wire is gone. And usually this first end gets a little bit longer than the second end. So I encourage you to notice how many wraps you usually make. And if you don't know, pick number 3, 4, or 5 and stop there. If I'm going to be wrapping a crazy wrap, then I know that I only want to make it about 1/8 of an inch thick. That's my personal length that I usually make. So I'm going to take my finger and wind that short, and I'm just going to create kind of I'll do a stacked wrap. And I usually have about a 3. And if I need to, I can use my fingernail to push that wrap up. And right there I'm going to stop, because I know that's about the size of wraps that I usually make. And then I'm going to use my cutter and come in with the end of the cutter just toward the piece and nip that excess piece off. I'll leave that there. And I'm going to use my chain nose plier, just to kind of squeeze it in. And if I want to stack that up, I can manipulate my coil if I like to, if I want to. So now my wrapped loop is ready to go, and I'm going to add my pearl on top. So thread my wire through my pearl, and here I am back at the beginning. So I'm going to hold on to my piece. My chain nose is going to grab the wire right above the beads, and if I did my math correctly, I have about 1.5 inches left, and I have a little bit more, which is okay. So again, my tool hand is going to hold, my opposite hand is going to do the work. I'm going to push the wire over the top of the tool. Make my bend. Put my round noses up in that corner, just like that. Hopefully I remember where in the tool I formed my bottom loop so that I can make them match. So I've got my round nose up in the corner, my opposite hand does the work. I pull the wire up, over the top, around and down. Now my bead's in the way and it kind of reminds me to stop. I have to reposition my tool, make sure that round nose gets snug, and then I bring the wire under the tool, just like I did. Now again, if I were going to be attaching this to my clasp, or a piece of chain or something like that, I would have to do that while this loop is open before I wrap it. But for now I'm just going to wrap mine closed. This is my first unit and I can attach it, I can attach the second one to it later. I'm going to grab the loop with my chain nose pliers, and again with my working hand I'm going to wrap the wire around that neck, I call it, from the loop to the bead, just like that. And then my cutter, I'm going to get in close with my cutter, the tip of my cutter, and trim any excess wire. And there's always a little stub when you cut, so I'm going to use my chain nose pliers again to just squish that stub in, or I always call it chomping. Kind of chomps that space, and I'm adjusting it a little bit. And there's my first double wrapped loop, a wrap loop on one end, wrap loop on the other. Thanks for joining me, and happy beading!